The sun blazed mercilessly over Fort Defiance, Arizona territory, casting harsh shadows across the windswept courtyard. Lady Evangeline Ashworth stood motionless, her elaborate burgundy traveling dress a stark contrast against the dusty adobe walls. At 25, she had become her mother's greatest burden and deepest shame. "This charade ends today, Evangeline," Lady Margaret Ashworth declared, her voice cutting through the desert air like a whip. The dowager lady's steel-gray eyes held no maternal warmth, only cold determination born of social desperation. "Your gluttony and stubborn defiance have destroyed every marriage prospect from Santa Fe to San Francisco." A small crowd of soldiers, traders, and their wives had gathered to witness the spectacle. Their whispers carried on the hot wind, each word a dagger to Evangeline's already wounded pride. For broken engagements, countless social disasters, and her ever-expanding figure had pushed her mother beyond the limits of tolerance. "Hosteen Yaji," Lady Margaret continued, addressing the tall Navajo warrior who stood with quiet dignity near the fort's gates. His traditional clothing, intricately woven shirt, silver and turquoise jewelry, and moccasins decorated with geometric patterns, marked him as a man of importance among his people. "As we discussed through the interpreters, I offer my daughter as compensation for the grazing rights dispute. She will serve your clan as you see fit." Evangeline's world tilted on its axis. "Mother, you cannot possibly." Silence. Margaret's gloved hand struck the air with finality. "You've had every opportunity to secure a respectable union. Now you'll learn what becomes of daughters who bring nothing but disgrace to their family name." Hosteen Yaji observed Evangeline with eyes the color of deep canyon shadows. Unlike her mother's disgusted glare, his gaze held neither judgment nor triumph, only a careful assessment, as if he were reading the landscape of her soul. "She belongs to your people now," Lady Margaret announced, already signaling to her driver. "Do with her what you will. Perhaps the wilderness will teach her the discipline I could not." As her mother's carriage disappeared in a cloud of red dust, Evangeline felt her knees buckle. Cast out like refuse, traded like a piece of livestock, all because she couldn't conform to society's narrow definition of womanhood. Hosteen Yaji approached her with the fluid grace of someone born to the desert. When she instinctively recoiled, he paused, then gently lifted her small traveling bag from where it had fallen in the dust. With a subtle gesture toward the horses waiting beyond the gates, he indicated she should follow. As they left Fort Defiance behind, Evangeline cast one final desperate look over her shoulder. Her mother was gone, and with her, the only life Evangeline had ever known. The Navajo horses moved with sure steps across terrain that seemed alien to Evangeline's eastern sensibilities. Red rock formations jutted from the earth like ancient cathedrals, and the vast sky stretched endlessly overhead, unmarked by the familiar boundaries of civilization. Evangeline clung to her horse's reins, her body unused to the motion and her elaborate side saddle impractical for desert travel. Every step sent jolts of pain through her back and legs, while her corset constricted her breathing in the thin mountain air. Hosteen Yaji rode slightly ahead, occasionally turning to ensure she maintained pace. His silence felt as vast as the landscape around them, neither hostile nor comforting, but simply present like the red cliffs and endless sky. "How far is it to wherever we're going?" Evangeline finally asked, her voice hoarse from the dry air. "Dine by Kia," he replied without turning. "The people's land. 2 days' ride." It was the first full sentence he'd spoken to her, and his English, though accented, was clear and precise. Someone had taught him well. On the second day, when her horse balked at crossing a narrow stream and Evangeline nearly tumbled into the water, Hosteen Yaji immediately dismounted. His hands were gentle but sure as he steadied both horse and rider, his concern evident despite the language barrier. "Injured?" he asked, his dark eyes searching her face. No, just shaken." She touched her ribs where the saddle horn had jabbed her. Without ceremony, he adjusted her stirrups and checked her horse's bridle, making small corrections she hadn't known were needed. When he helped her remount, his touch was respectful, professional, yet somehow more considerate than any gentleman's assistance she'd received in drawing rooms back east. That evening, as they made camp beside a small spring, he shared his food without fanfare: corn cakes, dried mutton, and piñon nuts. The flavors were foreign but satisfying, and Evangeline realized she was hungrier than she'd been in months, not the desperate, emotional craving she'd known in her mother's house, but genuine, physical need. "Why did you accept me?" she asked as they sat by the small fire. "I'm clearly nothing but a burden to you." Hosteen Yaji studied her across the dancing flames, his expression thoughtful. "White mothers do not understand the value of their children," he said finally. "They see only shame where there should be pride, weakness where there is strength." His words struck her like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they carried a truth she'd never dared to acknowledge. By the fourth day, Evangeline's body had begun to adapt to the rhythm of desert travel. The constant ache in her back had eased, and her breathing had adjusted to the high altitude. More surprisingly, she found herself noticing details she'd never observed before: the way shadows revealed hidden water sources, the tracks of desert animals in sandy washes, the subtle changes in vegetation that spoke of different elevations and climates. Hosteen Yaji had begun teaching her small things without ceremony. How to read the position of the sun and mountains for direction. Which plants could provide water in emergencies. The difference between the calls of various birds and what they revealed about weather and terrain. When she successfully identified a medicinal plant he'd shown her, desert sage used for cleansing ceremonies, he nodded with what might have been approval. "You learn quickly," he said. "This is good. The desert rewards those who listen." That evening, they encountered another Navajo traveler, an elderly man leading a pack mule, his face creased with pain. Hosteen Yaji spoke with him rapidly in Navajo, then turned to Evangeline. "He has injured his back. Cannot sit his horse properly. We will travel together tomorrow." As they made camp, Evangeline watched Hosteen Yaji tend to the old man with gentle efficiency. He prepared a poultice from plants he'd gathered, applied it with careful hands, and spoke in soft, reassuring tones that transcended language barriers. "You know healing?" Evangeline asked. "Some. My grandmother taught me before she walked on." He paused in his work to look at her. "You have gentle hands. In my grandmother's time, you would have been taught the healing ways." "Me? But I've never." "Healing is not learned only from books," he said, resuming his ministrations to the old man. "It comes from the heart that feels others' pain, from hands that bring comfort. I have watched you with animals, with small things. You have this gift." Evangeline stared at him in wonder. No one had ever suggested she possessed any gift worth cultivating. In her mother's world, her only value lay in making an advantageous marriage, something her appearance had made impossible. "How can you see that when my own mother couldn't?" "Your mother looked with eyes clouded by others' opinions," Hosteen Yaji replied. "I see with eyes that know the worth of all living things." The Navajo village appeared gradually, emerging from the landscape like a natural extension of the red earth and sage-covered hills. Traditional hogans, 8-sided homes built of logs and mud, dotted the valley, their doorways facing east to greet the morning sun. Sheep grazed in nearby meadows, tended by children whose laughter echoed off the canyon walls. Evangeline's arrival caused quiet interest but no hostility. Men and women paused in their daily tasks to observe her, their expressions curious but welcoming. She felt acutely aware of her foreign appearance, her pale skin reddened by desert sun, her elaborate dress torn and dusty, her figure obviously different from the lean, capable women around her. Hosteen Yaji guided her toward a large hogan at the village's heart, where an elderly woman emerged. Her silver hair was bound in a traditional chignon, her velvet blouse rich with silver buttons and turquoise jewelry. Despite her age, she moved with the dignity of someone accustomed to respect and authority. "Shima," Hosteen Yaji said respectfully, engaging in a brief conversation in Navajo that Evangeline couldn't follow. The old woman's dark eyes never left Evangeline's face as they spoke. Finally, she nodded and approached, taking Evangeline's hands in her own weathered ones. Her touch was warm, grounding, and when she spoke, her voice held the melody of the desert wind. "She is my mother," as Sanavlihi, Hosteen Yaji translated. "She says you have traveled far from your own people, that your spirit is tired but not broken. She offers you the hospitality of our clan." "What did you tell her about me?" "The truth. That you were cast out by those who should have protected you, that you need time to remember who you truly are." As Sanavlihi spoke again, her words flowing like water over stone. "She says the spirits do not make mistakes in how they shape people. If your mother's people could not see your worth, perhaps it is because you were meant to find your true path elsewhere." For the first time since leaving Fort Defiance, Evangeline felt something other than fear or despair. She felt the faintest stirring of hope, not for rescue or return to her old life, but for the possibility of becoming someone new. The first weeks in the village tested every assumption Evangeline had ever held about herself and her capabilities. Everything was different: the food, the language, the rhythm of daily life governed by seasons and ceremonies rather than social calendars and fashion. As Sanavlihi was patient but exacting, teaching her to grind corn on metates, to card and spin wool from the village sheep, to identify and gather the plants used for food and medicine. Evangeline's soft hands blistered and bled. Her back ached from bending over grinding stones. Her knees protested from kneeling at weaving looms. But gradually, something remarkable began to happen. The gnawing hunger that had plagued her for years, the compulsive need to fill some unnamed emptiness with food, began to quiet. Her body, occupied with learning new skills and adapting to physical labor, found satisfaction in accomplishment rather than consumption. Hosteen Yaji watched from a respectful distance, offering help when asked but never interfering with his mother's instruction. Sometimes Evangeline caught him observing her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. There was no pity in his gaze, no judgment, only a growing interest that seemed to see past her physical form to something deeper. One evening, as she successfully completed a small section of weaving without dropping stitches, she looked up to find him standing nearby. "You learn well," he said. "Shima says you have patient hands and a willing heart. These are rare gifts." "I never thought I had gifts of any kind," Evangeline admitted. "My mother made it quite clear I was a disappointment in every way." "Your mother was a foolish woman," he said with quiet conviction. "The holy people do not create anything without purpose. Your purpose was simply not the one she expected." The kindness in his voice, the absolute certainty with which he spoke of her worth, nearly broke her composure. No one had ever spoken to her with such gentle respect. "What do you see when you look at me?" she asked, the question barely a whisper. Hosteen Yaji was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes serious. "I see a woman learning to be herself for the first time. I see strength hidden beneath years of being told she was weak. I see beauty that has nothing to do with the shape of her body and everything to do with the kindness of her spirit." Summer brought the season of ceremonies, when the Dain honored the holy people and celebrated the harmony between earth and sky. Evangeline had been in the village for 3 months, and her transformation was remarkable, not just in her growing competence with daily tasks, but in her entire bearing. Her pale skin had taken on the golden hue of desert sun. Her body, strengthened by physical work and nourished by simple, wholesome food, moved with new confidence. Most importantly, her eyes had lost the haunted look of someone constantly found wanting. The village was preparing for a blessing way ceremony, welcoming a young woman into motherhood. Evangeline helped the other women with preparations, her hands now skilled at preparing food, arranging ceremonial items, and tending to the countless details such celebrations required. "You will participate in the singing," as Sanavlihi announced one morning, her tone making it clear this was not a request. "But I don't know the songs, and my Navajo is still so poor." "The songs come from the heart, not from perfect words." "You will learn." That evening, as the women gathered for the ceremony, Evangeline found herself seated in the circle, listening to the ancient melodies that spoke of harmony, balance, and the sacred relationship between all living things. When her turn came to add her voice, she sang hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence as the other women smiled encouragement. Host Yaji sat with the men across the ceremonial fire, but she could feel his gaze on her throughout the evening. When their eyes met across the flames, something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition, a deepening of the connection that had been growing between them for months. After the ceremony, as the village slowly settled into sleep, he approached her near the edge of the gathering. "You sang well tonight," he said. "The holy people heard you." "How do you know?" "Because you sang not with your voice alone, but with your whole being. That is when the spirits listen most closely." They stood in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the desert, coyotes calling in the distance, the whisper of wind through sagebrush, the soft breathing of the sleeping village. "Evangeline," he said, and the way he spoke her name made her heart race. "There is something I must tell you." "What?" "I am glad your mother cast you out. If she had not, you would never have found your way to us." "To me." The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibility. Autumn painted the high desert in shades of gold and amber, and Evangeline's place in the village had become as natural as breathing. She moved through her days with purpose and confidence, her skills grown impressive enough that other women sought her help with difficult weaving patterns or stubborn medicinal preparations. Her relationship with host Yaji had deepened into something neither could deny. They found excuses to work near each other, to share meals, to walk together in the evenings discussing everything from hunting techniques to the meaning of dreams. The careful propriety of their early interactions had given way to lingering touches and glances full of unspoken longing. One evening, as they sat by the stream that ran through the village, watching the sunset paint the red cliffs in brilliant orange, Evangeline finally voiced the question that had been haunting her. "What happens when you tire of me? When you realize what you've bound yourself to?" Host Yaji turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "What do you mean?" "I mean..." She struggled to find the words, gesturing helplessly at her body. "I'm not like other women. I never will be. I know what I look like, how I appear to others. Even here, even changed as I am, I'm still..." "Still what?" "Still fat," she said, the word falling between them like a stone. "Still the woman no respectable man would want to marry." Host Yaji was quiet for so long that Evangeline began to think she'd finally pushed him too far, finally made him see what her mother had always seen. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle, certain. "In my grandmother's stories," he began, "there are teachings about the different kinds of beauty the holy people created. There is the beauty of the eagle's flight, swift and fierce. There is the beauty of the mountain, strong and enduring. There is the beauty of the water, life-giving and essential." He reached out to touch her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with reverent care. "You are like the earth in spring, full and rich and life-giving. Your body tells the story of abundance, of the capacity to nurture and sustain. Your mother's people see only what they lack, not what you possess. But surely you would prefer..." "I would prefer you," he said with such conviction that it took her breath away. "I would prefer you as you are, as you have always been, as you will become. The spirits brought you to me not despite your body, but because of everything you are, body, heart, mind, and soul." When he kissed her, soft and reverent under the desert stars, Evangeline felt the last of her self-doubt crumble. This man, this warrior who could have chosen any woman in the village, wanted her, not a changed version of her, not an improved model, but exactly as she was. Winter in Navajo country was harsh but beautiful, with snow covering the red rocks and ice forming delicate patterns on the streams. The village contracted into itself, families gathered around fires, sharing stories and working on crafts that would see them through until spring. Evangeline had learned to find peace in the long, quiet evenings. Her hands were never idle, spinning wool, weaving blankets, preparing medicines for the coming year. But more than that, she had learned to find peace within herself, to sit in her own skin without the constant whisper of self-criticism that had haunted her former life. Hosteen Yaji had become a constant in her days. They worked together, ate together, planned together for the village's needs. To the rest of the clan, they had become a unit, their partnership accepted and expected. It was during the winter storytelling season that everything changed. The village had gathered in the largest hogan to hear the ancient tales that could only be told when the world slept under snow. Evangeline sat with the other women, now fluent enough in Navajo to follow most of the stories about Coyote's tricks and First Man's journey through the worlds. When the formal storytelling ended and people began to drift toward their homes, Hosteen Yaji stood and began to speak. His words were formal, ceremonial, and as their meaning became clear, Evangeline's heart began to race. He was telling the village of his intention to marry her. Not asking permission, not making a proposal subject to approval, but announcing a decision made in harmony with traditional ways and spiritual guidance. As Sanavli he rose and spoke at length, her words flowing like music. Other elders added their voices, and gradually Evangeline realized she was hearing not objection, but blessing. When Hosteen Yaji finally approached her, the entire village watching with benevolent interest, his words were simple and sure. "Will you walk in beauty beside me for all our days?" Through her tears, she managed to whisper, "Yes." The village erupted in celebration, voices raised in songs of blessing and joy. But through it all, Evangeline could only see Hosteen Yaji's face, could only feel the truth of his love washing over her like sunlight after a long, cold night. The wedding preparations consumed the village for weeks. In Navajo tradition, marriage was not just a union between two people but between two families, two clans, requiring careful attention to ceremony and custom. Evangeline found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity as the women of the village worked to prepare her wedding dress. The traditional Navajo squaw dress was woven from the finest wool, dyed in rich colors that spoke of earth and sky. When they draped it on her for fittings, Evangeline was amazed at how beautiful she felt, not despite her size, but enhanced by clothing designed to celebrate feminine abundance rather than hide it. In the old days, as Sanavli he explained as she adjusted the intricate silver belt, women of substance were prized for their ability to bear strong children and survive hard times. Your mother's people have forgotten that beauty comes in many forms. The ceremony itself took place at dawn, as was traditional, with the couple standing before the sacred fire as the sun painted the eastern mountains in gold. Hosteen Yaji wore his finest clothing, traditional shirt decorated with silver buttons, turquoise jewelry that had been in his family for generations, moccasins crafted by his mother's hands. As they spoke their vows in both English and Navajo, promising to walk in harmony through all the seasons of their lives, Evangeline felt herself becoming someone entirely new. Not the rejected daughter of Lady Margaret Ashworth, not the failed debutante of Charleston society, but a woman complete in herself, worthy of love and respect. The celebration continued for 3 days, with feasting, dancing, and the gifting of sheep and horses to establish the couple's household. Evangeline moved through it all in a dream, overwhelmed by the genuine joy and acceptance of her new family. On their wedding night, alone in the hogan that would now be their home, Hosteen Yaji took her hands and spoke the words she had never dared hope to hear. "You are beautiful to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Every part of you, every curve and line and soft place, is sacred to me. You are my heart, my home, my harmony." When he loved her, it was with a reverence that healed years of shame and self-doubt. In his hands, her body became not something to hide or apologize for, but a source of joy and connection, a vessel for love and pleasure and the promise of new life. 5 years had passed since Evangeline's wedding, and the village had become truly home in every sense. She had borne 2 children, a daughter with her father's dark eyes and her mother's gentle hands, and a son who promised to grow as strong and wise as his grandfather's people. Evangeline's skills as a healer had grown renowned throughout the region. People came from distant settlements seeking her knowledge of plants and remedies, her gentle touch with difficult births, her ability to ease both physical and spiritual ailments. The gift Hosteen Yaji had seen in her during their first desert journey had blossomed into something that served the entire community. She had also become a bridge between worlds, using her knowledge of white society to help negotiate fair trading agreements and resolve disputes with territorial authorities. The woman who had once been considered useless by her mother's society had found ways to use every aspect of her experience in service of her adopted people. On this particular morning, as she tended her garden of medicinal plants while her children played nearby, an unexpected visitor appeared. A well-dressed woman on horseback, accompanied by a small military escort, approached the village with obvious discomfort and disdain. Evangeline recognized her immediately, despite the years that had passed. Her mother, Lady Margaret Ashworth, had aged considerably, her face bearing the lines of chronic dissatisfaction and social strain. "Evangeline?" Margaret's voice carried shock and something that might have been recognition. "Is it really you?" Evangeline rose from her garden, wiping soil from her hands with quiet dignity. Her own transformation was complete: sun-darkened skin, traditional Navajo dress, silver and turquoise jewelry that spoke of respected status within the clan. Most remarkably, she moved with confidence and grace, her bearing that of a woman entirely comfortable with herself and her place in the world. "Hello, Mother. But what has become of you? Living like this, among these people?" Margaret's eyes took in the village, the children playing in the dust, the traditional hogans and customs that surrounded them. "I've become myself," Evangeline replied simply. "What brings you here after all these years?" Reports reached Charleston about a white woman living among the Navajo, serving as some sort of medicine woman. "When I realized it might be you." Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "Your cousin Edmund died childless. The family fortune, there are inheritances to consider. You could return, live comfortably, respectably." "I am comfortable," Evangeline said. "And more respected than I ever was in Charleston." It was then that Hosteen Yaji appeared, having heard of the visitor. He approached with their daughter on his shoulders and their son's hand in his, every inch the proud family man. The children chattered in Navajo as he set them down, their obvious love and security evident in every gesture. Margaret's eyes widened as she took in the scene, her daughter's obvious happiness, the children's robust health, the unmistakable bond between husband and wife. "But surely you must want more for your children than this primitive existence?" "I want them to grow up knowing they are valued for who they are, not what others expect them to be," Evangeline replied. "I want them to understand that true wealth lies in family, community, and harmony with the world around them." She paused, looking at her mother with something that might have been pity. "I want them never to feel the shame and self-doubt you taught me to carry. In that, I believe I've succeeded." Margaret stayed only one night, leaving the next morning with obvious relief to be returning to what she considered civilization. She made no further efforts to convince Evangeline to return, perhaps finally understanding that her daughter had found something in the desert that the drawing rooms of Charleston could never provide. As the dust settled behind her mother's departing party, Evangeline felt Hosteen Yaji's arms come around her from behind. Their children pressed close, chattering about the strange white lady who had spoken their mother's first language. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The life you left behind?" Evangeline leaned back against his strength, watching the sun set over the red cliffs that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. In the distance, sheep bells chimed as the flocks returned home. Cooking fires sent fragrant smoke into the evening air. The sounds of the village, laughter, conversation, the eternal rhythm of life lived in harmony, surrounded them like a blessing. "Never," she said, covering his hands with her own. "I didn't leave a life behind, Yaji. I found my life here, with you, with our children, with our people. Everything before was just waiting." As the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, Evangeline knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The rejected daughter had become a beloved wife, mother, and healer. The woman deemed worthless by society's standards had found immeasurable worth in service to others. She walked in beauty now, surrounded by love that saw her truly and accepted her completely. It had taken a journey through the desert to find her way home to herself, but every step had been worth it.